Beneath the rusted steel and silent concrete of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, a lethal threat has been quietly accumulating. Time stopped for the city of Pripyat on April 26, 1986. Before the meltdown, this was a thriving community. Today, the brutalist architecture is barely visible as nature reclaims the wide boulevards and public squares. The rusted infrastructure remains exactly where it was left during the hurried evacuation. This amusement park sat empty, never opening for the May Day celebrations. Thousands of tourists now walk these streets every year. Armed with personal dosimeters and guided by strict rules, they visit a landscape that feels like a static, frozen museum. A highly concentrated radioactive threat is currently pooling in the darkness beneath the surface, far removed from the stable ruins visited by tourists. A short distance from the city center stands the Pripyat Hospital. On the night of the explosion, the emergency rooms here were overwhelmed. Firefighters and plant workers were rushed through these doors, suffering from acute radiation sickness as they tried to contain the burning reactor. Deep below the triage wards, a set of barricaded stairs leads into the hospital's pitch-black basement. Scattered across the flooded floor are the discarded turnout coats, boots, and helmets of those first responders. Almost 40 years later, these garments remain heavily contaminated. Stepping close to this pile of decaying fabric will instantly trigger a dosimeter alarm. Heavy radioactive isotopes released during the 1986 explosion settled into the lowest points of the hospital's architecture, where they remain fixed decades later. 2 miles from the hospital lies the epicenter of the disaster, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The explosion tore the massive concrete lid completely off Reactor 4, shattering the building and exposing the glowing core to the open air. Inside the adjacent control rooms, operators had been running a late-night safety test. The power surged, the reactor stalled, and their frantic attempts to insert the control rods triggered the final catastrophic chain reaction. This 3D cross-section shows the creation of corium. Nuclear fuel, concrete, and metal melted into radioactive lava that penetrated the structural floor and flowed into subterranean corridors. That mass pooled in the basement. Standing near it for just 300 seconds delivers a fatal dose. This is the actual mass, photographed by cleanup crews. It became known as the elephant's foot. Containing this material required the construction of the new safe confinement structure. At 36,000 tons, the steel arch was slid over the decaying ruins to prevent further radioactive dust from escaping. The elephant's foot is sealed. However, contaminated groundwater flowing beneath the power plant complex continues to transport isotopes into other subterranean chambers. Less than a mile from the entombed reactor stands Block 5. It was 70% complete in 1986, frozen mid-construction, with the cranes still locked in position over the unfinished roof. This 3D wireframe maps the footprint of Reactor 5. Engineers built a network of subterranean pump rooms and deep piping shafts beneath the main floor. When electrical power was lost, drainage pumps failed. Groundwater immediately rushed back in, entirely flooding these lower levels. Entering these basements requires descending crumbling concrete stairwells into pitch-black water. The air is stale and metallic, and the only sound is the rhythmic drip of condensation echoing off the concrete walls. For decades, radioactive dust and heavy isotopes like cesium-137 have washed off the surface and filtered into this groundwater. The flooded corridors act as a massive toxic sink. The water itself is highly radioactive. Even without active fuel or a melted core, the basement of Reactor 5 has become a lethal trap. Across the 1,000 square miles of the exclusion zone, the massive surface structures are succumbing to the elements. The entire area is undergoing severe structural decay. Rain, ice, and wind are tearing apart the concrete shells and oxidizing the exposed metal. Rusted steel I-beams fracture under the immense weight of unsupported roofs. Chunks of concrete spall and crash to the ground, filling the air with dust. The isotopes trapped in these subterranean shafts will remain hazardous long after the concrete walls around them have crumbled into dust. Ongoing structural failures and the migration of contaminated water ensure that Chernobyl's subterranean chambers will remain unstable for centuries. Subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most dangerous